Now here's the other word of caution, okay? And I'm going to, instead of describing this one here, I'm going to flip to the next slide where you can see it a little more clearly. An easement by prescription. Okay? An easement by prescription. I have to warn you because this concept is going to sound the exact same as another concept called adverse possession. I'm going to drill it into your brains, the difference. Okay? Remember what I told you an easement was. An easement is the right to use the property of another. Adverse possession is a way to take somebody else's property. And they are the exact same criteria. It's just one is I should get to use it, one is I should get to own it. And so the criteria for an easement by prescription is this OCEAN acronym. Open, continuous, exclusive, adverse, and notorious. Open means you didn't conceal it. Continuous means you didn't stop doing it. Exclusive means you're the only one doing it. Adverse means adverse to the ownership. You don't own it, but you're doing it anyway. And notorious means without permission. And it's got a very long period of time. It's 20 years. Let me try to explain this to you in just the easiest way I can. Folks, there are some really weird shaped lots in North Carolina, in case you didn't know this, all over the place. So imagine you had two pieces of property that look something like this, neighboring each other. And there's a house here, and a driveway here, and there's a house here, and a garage here. And their driveway runs something like this. And let's say that the person, this is lot A, this is lot B. The person who lives in lot B, every day when they get home, they just go straight into their driveway like that. And so they are obviously driving over lot A's property. Everybody agree with me there? They're driving through it. Just a small little piece, but they're driving through it. And imagine that this goes on for a very long time, like 20 years. And for whatever reason, let's just say for the simplistic factor of this, that the two homeowners, right? The same homeowners that have been there for over 20 years. And one day the owner of lot A just snaps. And he says, for the love of God, why do you keep driving through my yard instead of just circling around your driveway to get to your garage? It has been 20 years that you've been doing this and I'm tired of it and I want you to stop. If it's been this long and it meets this criteria, he can actually go to the courts and tell lot A's the owner of lot A to stick it. He can force the right to keep doing it. That is an easement by prescription. And so if he's been doing this without hiding it and the prime of day, every single day he does it, it's open. He hasn't stopped doing it for 20 years. It's continuous. He's the only one driving through that person's property. It's exclusive. He never got, or he doesn't own it, but he's driving through it anyway. That's adverse. And he's never gotten permission to do it. That would be notorious, right? It sounds like so like when we say notorious, but it just means without permission. And if he can prove it, then the judge is going to side with him and they're going to tell lot A to shut up. It's like, nope, he gets to keep driving through it. Just drive. We all still agree that lot A still owns that piece of dirt, but the owner of lot B gets to keep driving through it because he's been given an easement by prescription. What you got, Raphael?
Yeah, in this case, if the A cannot do anything, then he sells the property. What happens with the person, the new owner?
You mean after the easement's been granted?
Okay, so this. Okay, I understand that.
Yeah, I mean, because once it gets granted, it's going to be recorded against the property that the owner of lot B keep driving through there. And once again, folks, these are all very fascinating. Let's not go down the rabbit holes here because, like, what if this person moved and they didn't know it, but then this person did it, and like, you know, it's a very abstract thing, folks. 20 years is a long time, and you know, you would have to go to court to force this, but it is still testable. Now, understand the difference here too, okay? When we're dealing with adverse possession, in North Carolina, it's 20 years, and it's the same acronym, but the difference is, I shouldn't get to keep using it. I should be able to steal their property and own it. That's the difference. Adverse possession is stealing it and now owning it. Easement by prescription is I should get to keep using it, driving through it, accessing it, whatever that may be. But the criteria is identical in North Carolina. Not all states recognize this, but it's just kind of a weird thing. Now we're talking about ending easements, and we're going to talk about the adverse possession later, so I'll clarify the difference again when we get into what we call involuntary alienations. When we're talking about ending easements, this is going to be another kind of unique thing that gets people a little confused. If the purpose no longer exists, an easement could end. So, for example, in that previous visual, if that one property was able to create their own driveway and they no longer needed to access by way of the other one, that could cause an easement to die. One of the ones that people get wrong more than anything, and let me just kind of give you a visual on this one too, is they always make a mistake and they think, okay, well, if there's these two lots with this shared driveway, like, and going back to my previous client's example that, you know, hey, if you own lot A and you own lot B, well, that easement no longer exists. Yes, it does. Because there is still a lot A and a lot B. I told you, an appurtenant easement deals with lot A and lot B. So you owning both does not kill an easement. However, when you own both, you could hire a surveyor to come out and redraw the map and call it lot C. And now that there is only one lot, so a merger would kill an easement because there's not two lots anymore. But we can all agree that if you own lot A and lot B, you may still decide to sell it later and you still need that easement. Owning both does not kill it. Merging them, combining them, would kill it. Bree, was your question in regard to the easement by prescription versus the adverse possession? Is that what you were talking about? Where are you at?
Yes.
Yeah. It depends on more than that. You really wouldn't have... It depends on how you request it, but it also depends on some other things. Obviously, when we get into the stealing of land, I don't think there's a judge out there that would side with stealing like that little portion of land because of that. That would just be, you know, a lot. The real reason adverse possession exists is abandonment of land. I'll get into that a little bit more later. But yeah, in a nutshell, it would depend on what you're going after. And it's not automatic. You would still have to prove in court that you should get it, and the judge gets to decide.
But for like the test, if it asks us like what has these qualifications, it would be like an either or type of situation.
And so they're never going to ask that because that wouldn't be fair. What they're going to say is, you know, what would be the criteria of adverse possession, or what would be the criteria of prescriptive easements, or, you know, they're going to say, you know, Bree went to court to force her neighbor to continue to allow her to access their property through the neighbor's yard after she had been doing it for 20 years. This would be an example of, and you would have to say a easement by prescription because you're just using it, not trying to steal it. But adverse possession may be an answer choice that you got to keep it straight.
Thank you.
Yeah. Of course, abandonment of easements could potentially cause it. Non-use of prescription easements could potentially cause it. And then, of course, the release of the rights. Understand when we're talking about the dominant tenement and the servient tenement, the dominant tenement would have to decide to release the servient tenement. The servient tenement can never just be like, no, I'm done. Nope, it's recorded, it's stuck. Can't really do much in that regard. Party walls, this would kind of be similar to what I said with that driveway. You know, it kind of ran over both properties and both people would have the right to use. Of course, same thing too when we're dealing with townhouses. I told you there's that party wall in between. Technically, you both own halfway into that wall. Nothing too crazy there. But just make sure you know kind of the vocab going with these easements versus the easement and gross and the appurtenant easement. Now, some of the other, you know, things that we've already talked about, and we're going to get into those more in their own section. I told you restrictive covenants are called private land use controls, right? The chickens, the shed, the this, the that. Of course, the public land use controls are also a type of encumbrance. And so all of these things that we've been talking about, these are all types of encumbrances, right? The liens are limitations. Can't have chickens are limitations. And easements are limitations. Now, earlier when I was talking about the easement and grows, somebody said, oh, so it's like a verbal thing. No. The verbal thing is called a license. If you gave permission verbally to somebody to come and hunt your land, or to fish in your pond, or to access your property verbally, it's called a license. And a license is not considered an encumbrance. Why? You can revoke it at any time. See the big difference there? Easements were written, recorded, and could not be just terminated willy-nilly. They had to meet certain criteria to go away. A license can be terminated at any time, and as such, it is not an encumbrance. So, for example, the pond I have down in Georgia, I've had a couple of people ask me before, hey, do you mind if I go fishing there? I say, sure, as long as you let me know you can go fishing there. Folks, if I sell that property and somebody else owns it, they are not still allowed to go fishing there because there's a new owner. Their right to fish would die. If I said, nope, you can't come anymore, it would die. So a license for that reason is not an encumbrance because if you sell it, it dies. If they tell you to stop, it dies. So then the last one is arguably the one that students remember. Well, I say last one, not the last one. The next one is the one that students arguably remember over all others when we're talking about actual encumbrances. Because like I said, licenses get an honorable mention here. They're not an encumbrance. Not an encumbrance. Not an encumbrance. Okay? Licenses can be revoked. The next one is the encroachments. And so I'm sure every single one of you have heard this term before, whether you realize exactly what it is. So for lack of a better way of putting it, it is when an improvement, remember what we said, fences and foundations and houses and pools and all these things are considered improvements on the land. And so it is when an improvement extends beyond the property line. Well, folks, encroachments, right? Here's the way that people like to remember it. And I mean, if it works, it works. There's this word hidden in there, roach. And just like a roach ain't supposed to be in your house, this is somebody else's improvement that ain't supposed to be on your property. So if your neighbor's fence comes across your property line, if their house comes across your property line, if their shed comes across your property line, that is an encroachment. Now, as you might imagine, if it was something like a fence, it sucks, but it's easy to remedy. Tear up the portion of your fence that's over on your neighbor's property and rebuild it on your own. Problem solved. Does it cost money? Yeah. Is it inconvenient? Yeah. But it's fixable. But if you look at this picture right here, folks, this is bad. Okay, you got this big old property, this building, and it's going across the property line. And I don't know if that's 5 feet, 10 feet, I don't know. But it is not an easy fix when a house or a pool or something huge like that extends over a property line. And so sometimes as an encumbrance, encroachments can be so bad that they can make both properties unmarketable. Case in point, imagine somebody was offering to sell you Lot A. Imagine the marketing. Oh, wouldn't you love to own this beautiful commercial building? By the way, when you buy this, you'll be in litigation with the owner of Lot B for the rest of your life. Does that sound enticing in any way, shape, or form? Imagine trying to sell Lot B. Beautiful undeveloped lot ready for you to build on. However, when you own this, you will be in litigation with the owner of Lot A for the rest of your life. Yet again, doesn't sound too appealing. Understand the big detriment here, folks. How do you fix this if this happens in the most cost-effective way? If you can, you could potentially negotiate with the owner of Lot B and ask them to sell you this piece and have a surveyor go out and redraw the lot lines, and now you're not going to be encroaching. However, that's privately owned property that you built on. Nobody is obligated to sell you property that they privately own. And more importantly than that, nobody said they had to make it affordable. So what if the owner of Lot B says, okay, yeah, happy to sell it to you, $6 million. It can be a very big mess. Now, even in today's day and age with all of our technology and equipment, this does still happen. People make mistakes. Mistakes get moved, right? People go out there after the survey comes. They'll move stuff over. The developers will come in, the builders. It does happen. It's a mess. So called an encroachment. Now, of course, we'll talk about it later. The way that you discover these things is with a property survey. It is something done by a licensed surveyor where they go out and find the property boundaries to identify if there are any encroachments, easements, floodplains, things of that nature. So we'll talk about surveys a little bit more later. Which leads us to this big old fun-filled fancy list of vocab from everything we have discussed thus far. What is severalty? Ownership and severalty.
You own it, just you outright.
Yeah, single owner. Could be one person, could be one entity. Ownership and severalty. And then we had the different types of concurrent ownership. Of course, tenancy in common. Folks, who can have tenancy in common?
Anyone.
Anyone. And what is unique about tenancy in common?
You can own different percentages but have the same amount of access or like.
That is true. You can have different percentages and it's undivided. And then I will take the other thing in chat and add it to that. It can be willed, right? Tenancy in common can be willed. How about joint tenancy? Who can have joint tenancy?
Couples.
People who buy at the same time.
Yeah, but aside from that, is there any restrictions?
They have to be married.
Not joint tenancy.
It cannot be willed.
Yeah, so let's start with the first piece. Joint tenancy is for anybody. Anybody can have it, but the unique thing is they have to take that title at the same time, right? Have to have that unity of time, title, possession, and interest. You got to take your interest at the same time is really what it comes down to. And so the other piece was that right of survivorship. I told you from a national point of view, it is always going to be the right of survivorship. But sometimes in North Carolina, we get a little squirrely on you because it has to have that specific language that says with right of survivorship. And because of it, you cannot will your share if you die. Can you sell your share of a joint tenancy? Yes. And what would the new person come in as? A tick. Yeah. Tenant in common. A tick. Tenant in common. That's exactly right. Of course, tenancy by the entirety is for who?
Couples. Married.
Married couple.
You got to be very careful, not just couples. They have to be legally married at the time they take title to the property. Okay, have to be legally married. So remember what I told you. It seems silly, but it could be a test question. Which of the types of concurrent ownership could a brother and sister not have? Tenancy by the entirety, because they cannot be married. So automatically equal shares, automatic right of survivorship. It is a non-severable interest. And of course, it can only be severed by death, divorce, or mutual agreement. And then you're going to get a lot of will questions about these types of things there. And then remember, too, that if you own a property in severalty and then get married, that's a marital interest. Okay, that never going to automatically upgrade to tenancies by the entirety. Of course, timeshares, fractional ownership. I told you the biggest thing there was the North Carolina Timeshare Act, the 555-500 rule, definition of a timeshare, 5 or more periods over at least 5 years, 5-day rescission period on the purchase of all timeshares. The Real Estate Commission will fine timeshare developers fines of $500 per violation with no maximum, and then all monies have to be held in escrow for 10 days. Conventional life estate, life tenant, and the measuring life of the same person. That means it is never an estate of inheritance, cannot be willed. Life estate per ultra V, life tenant and measuring life are different people, and for that reason it can be willed. If the life tenant dies before the measuring life, they can will it, and then the next person would get it until the measuring life dies. An encroachment is an improvement built over the property line. Pertinent easement is between a property and a property. Dominant tenement, servient tenement. Easement engrossed between property and a person. License is not an encumbrance. It is just verbal permission, can be revoked at any time or would die with selling the property. Liens we're going to talk about more later, but it's the right for somebody to go after you or property because you owe them money. And then deed restrictions, we will get into more later as well. And lis pendens is just a fancy word for pending litigation, meaning this property is subject to pending litigation. It is an encumbrance for that reason.